Hello everyone, welcome to Literophile. Today we are going to discuss a few questions, say about 10 of them, based on the topic Literary Criticism of William Shakespeare. Let's move on to the first question. Which critic calls Shakespeare the largest and most comprehensive soul? The question is, which critic calls Shakespeare the largest and most comprehensive soul? We have four options. Option A, Dr. Johnson. Option B, John Dryden. Option C, Alexander Pope. And option D, none of the above. Now, the first three options are the names of critics who belong to the neoclassical period. And then the last option is none of the above. So let's look at the answer to this question. And the answer is John Dryden. Now, where does he call Shakespeare thus? Let us take a look. So, John Dryden has written a specific work, an essay, which is called Of Dramatic Poesy. Now, it's one of his famous, it could be seen as his most famous critical output. John Dryden's most famous critical output, which was published in the year 1668. Now, this records a debate that is conducted among four different speakers of the name Eugenius, Critic, Lycidius, and Neander. Now, Neander is a mirror image of Dryden himself, and Eugenius, Critic, Lycidius are all projections of other friends or other associates of Dryden who lived during his period. Now, there are three major individual points that are discussed as a part of this long debate. Now, the first point is a debate that is conducted between the ancient writers and the modern writers. So the point of debate is ancients versus the moderns. Who is better? Are the ancient writers better or the modern writers better? Now, the second point of debate is the quality of French writers and English writers. So the second point of debate is between French writers and English writers. Again, are the French writers better or the English writers better in terms of quality? And the third point of debate is use of rhyme. Use of rhyme in drama. Should a rhyme necessarily be used in drama or not? So these are the three important points of discussion that you find in this particular debate. Now, if you look at the second point, that is the point where the debaters discuss the quality of the French writers and the English writers, there you find this particular debate happening between two characters. One is Lycidius, who is in support of the French writers, and on the opposite side we have Neander. Again, as I told you, he's a projection of a character projected based on Dryden himself, and he is in support of English dramatists. In order to support the English writers, he makes a brief assessment of the English dramatic tradition, and by doing this, he refers to specific authors like Shakespeare, Ben Jonson, Beaumont and Fletcher, etc. So, while talking about the English dramatic tradition, in order to emphasize how important and how rich the English dramatic tradition is, he talks about individual writers, and that is where Dryden refers to Shakespeare as the largest and most comprehensive soul. All right, so let's move on to the next question. Moving on to the second question. Name the author of the work Shakespeare from the Margins, Language, Culture, Context, which was published in the year 1996. Now we have the names of four prominent authors who have written quite a lot about Shakespeare himself. Now we are supposed to narrow down which author is responsible For this specific work, Shakespeare from the Margins, Language, Culture, Context. Now, the first option, option A, is Harold Bloom. Second option is Stephen Booth. Third option, Patricia Parker. And option D is Jonathan Dollimore. Let's look at the answer. And the answer is Patricia Parker. Now, Patricia Parker, in this particular work, argues that attention to Shakespearean wordplay reveals unexpected connections not just within the plays but also between the plays and their contemporary culture. So Patricia Parker basically tries to establish how the wordplay or how language made use of by Shakespeare is able to resonate between the play as well as the contemporary culture or the culture that the plays seem to depict. So that is the second question. Moving on to the third question. Okay. Shakespeare famously neglects to observe Aristotle's rules concerning the three dramatic unities. Which of the Aristotelian dramatic unities does Johnson, that is Dr. Samuel Johnson, believe Shakespeare to observe most successfully? Now, we all know which are the three dramatic unities that Aristotle refers to. One is unity of time, the other one is unity of place, and the last one is unity of action. So those are the three different options given to us. Plus another one is, the last option is none of these. So A, unity of place, B, unity of action, C, unity of time, and the last option is D, which is none of these. And the answer to this question would be unity of action. Now, even Johnson feels, though Johnson tries to support Shakespeare and laudate Shakespeare in different terms, even Johnson agrees that Shakespeare does not adhere to the unities of time and place very often. But on the other hand, there is one unity, which is unity of action, which he readily adheres to. Now, in which work does he talk about this? In which work does Johnson talk about Shakespeare adhering to the unity of time, place, and action? Unity of action, adhering to unity of action. Samuel Johnson defends Shakespeare in his particular work, which is called as Preface to Shakespeare. Now, this is an important critical work on Shakespeare written by Samuel Johnson, published in the year 1765. So it is in this work that he defends Shakespeare. And according to Samuel Johnson, Shakespeare observes unity of action, may not be in the structure of the play. That is, he may not introduce complication and denouement, but he observes the requirement of an organic unity. Okay, there is something called as an organic unity that is required of in a play. So he may not actually resort to that particular structure of dramatic action where there is an introduction, an invocation, and then the climax, the structural unity, he may not actually adhere to that unity of action, but he surely does adhere to the creation of an organic unity that is found in a play as a whole. And by this organic unity, he means maintaining a proper beginning, middle, and end. Maintaining a beginning, middle, and end, and thereby ensuring an organic unity to a specific play. All right. So Johnson supports Shakespeare by saying that though he does not adhere to unities of time and place, he does adhere to the unity of action, not in terms of the structural unity of the play, but he tries to bring in an organic unity wherein he talks about a proper beginning, middle, and end to the play. Moving on to the next question, which is the fourth question, right? Moving on to the fourth question. Now we have we have the name of an essay, and we're supposed to identify the writer of that essay. Now the question goes like this. Name the writer of the essay, How Many Children Had Lady Macbeth? Now this is a very popular essay. It was published in the year 1933, and we are supposed to identify the writer of the essay. Now, as usual, we have 4 options. The first one is option A, Harold Bloom. The second one is option B, T.S. Eliot. Option C, Alan Bloom. And option D, Lionel Charles Knights, popularly known as L.C. Knights. And the answer to this question is L.C. Knights, Lionel Charles Knights. Now, this work is important in terms of it being a very much celebrated attack on the style of criticism that was represented by A.C. Bradley. Now, who is A.C. Bradley? A.C. Bradley is also a very famous Shakespearean critic, right? All of you must be familiar with A.C. Bradley, who is well known for his work of Shakespearean criticism called Shakespearean Tragedy. That's his most important work, Shakespearean Tragedy, subtitled Lectures on Hamlet, Othello, King Lear, Macbeth. And it was published in the year 1904. So A.C. Bradley is a very famous Shakespearean critic, famous for his particular work, his Shakespearean criticism on his tragedies, which is called Shakespearean Tragedy, and the work is subtitled Lectures on Hamlet, Othello, King Lear, and Macbeth. And it was published in the year 1904. So this style of criticism that was represented and established by A.C. Bradley was questioned and attacked in the essay How Many Children Had Lady Macbeth by Lionel Charles Knights. Now let's move on to the next question, which is the 5th one. Which work of Shakespeare's was regarded as an artistic failure by T.S. Eliot? I repeat the question. Which work of Shakespeare's was regarded as an artistic failure by T.S. Eliot? Now, the options given below are option A, Hamlet, option B, Macbeth, option C, Tempest, option D, Othello. The answer to this question is Hamlet. Now, T.S. Eliot has written a very famous essay called Hamlet and His Problems, in which he introduces a concept called as objective correlative. Now, the name of the essay is Hamlet and His Problems. All right, and he introduces the concept of objective correlative in this particular essay. It's a very famous concept, objective correlative. All right. Now, what essentially is this objective correlative? Objective correlative refers to an object, a situation, or a series of events that help convey or generate a specific emotion within the spectator. And as an example, he refers to the hand washing scene of Lady Macbeth. Like, in order to actually resonate that feeling of guilt from the character to the spectator, the hand washing scene has very much helped, because that same amount of guilt is generated within the spectators as well as a result of the desperate hand washing scene. Now, such a scene or such an object or such a chain of events is seen lacking in Hamlet, is what T.S. Eliot has to refer to. So he says, because Hamlet lacks objective correlative, this connection or this establishment of a connection between the character and the spectator, Eliot considers Hamlet to be an artistic failure. So he calls Shakespeare's Hamlet as an artistic failure in this particular essay, Hamlet and His Problems. And the reason T.S. Eliot comes up with for the same is the lack of objective correlative. Let's move on to the sixth question. And the sixth question is, who said that Shakespeare in his comedies has only heroines and no heroes? Option A, Ben Jonson. Option B, John Ruskin. Option C, Thomas Carlyle. And option D, William Hazlitt. And the answer to this question is John Ruskin. Now, apparently, John Ruskin is unable to find a truly heroic figure in Shakespeare's plays. While he does name a few women like Desdemona, Cordelia, Portia, etc., who have been conceived in the highest heroic type of humanity. So, there is no, if you look at a male heroic figure, that seems to be lacking in Shakespeare's work. So that is what John Ruskin felt. And therefore, he comes up with this comment saying that Shakespeare in his comedies do not portray heroes. Instead, he tries to portray only heroines. He finds the presence of only heroines in his comedies. So that was the answer to that question is John Ruskin. Moving on to the next question, which is the seventh one. Okay, this is also the name of an essay and you're supposed to identify the writer of this essay. Now, this essay is also a pretty famous one. The essay is called On Knocking at the Gate in Macbeth. Now, this particular essay was written by who? That's the question. Option A, Thomas Love Peacock. Option B, Samuel Taylor Coleridge or S.T. Coleridge. Option C, R.L. Stevenson. Option D, Thomas D. Quincy. And the answer to this question is Thomas D. Quincy. Now, this particular essay concerns a very famous scene that you find in the work, in Shakespeare's work Macbeth, which is referred to as the Potter's Scene. Okay, it refers to the Potter's Scene. It's an entire discussion about the Potter's Scene and how important, how fundamentally significant it has turned out to be in this particular play, Macbeth, written by Shakespeare. So, Thomas D. Quincy comes up with an essay in Shakespearean criticism, which was published in the year October, in the month of October in 1823. Okay. In 1823 in the London Magazine. This essay was published in the London Magazine. All right, in the London Magazine, and it has been called his finest single critical piece. Now, this essay concerns Act 2, Scene 3 in Macbeth, in which the murder of King Duncan by Macbeth and Lady Macbeth is succeeded by Macduff and Lennox knocking at the gate of the castle. The knocking ends Act 2, Scene 2 and opens Act 2, Scene 3, which is the famous Potter Scene. So, Potter Scene is Act 2, Scene 3. Act 2, Scene 3, which is the famous Potter Scene. Now, De Quincey wrote that the knocking always had a profound effect on him. To quote him, it reflected back upon the murderer a peculiar awfulness and a depth of solemnity. So, this is what Thomas De Quincey has to say about the depth of how awful this is what Thomas De Quincey has to talk about the intense depth of the Potter Scene, which is represented by this Act 2, Scene 3 in the play Macbeth, written by Shakespeare. And it is based on this that he writes this essay in the year 1823, and it was published in the London Magazine. And the name of the essay is On Knocking at the Gate in Macbeth. So that is about the 7th question. Moving on to the 8th question. Motiveless malignity is a phrase coined by S.T. Coleridge while discussing the character of Dash. So, which character does Coleridge refer to when he uses when he coins this particular phrase, motiveless malignity? Option A, Hamlet. Option B, Othello. Option C, Edmund. And option D, Iago. Now, Hamlet is the Prince of Denmark, the titular character of the play Hamlet. Othello, again, the titular character of the play Othello. He's the Moor of Venice. And Edmund is the antagonist who appears in King Lear. And Iago is the antagonist in Othello, who counters Othello. So all these are Shakespearean characters. We are clear about that. And the answer to this question would be Iago. Now, this particular phrase, the motive hunting of motiveless malignity, that is the exact phrase that is coined by S.T. Coleridge. And that was written by Coleridge in a note on Shakespeare in a series of lectures for the winter of 1818-1819. Okay, a series of lectures that was published for the year of 1818-1819. Now, this specific note concerns Act 1, Scene 3. Act 1, Scene 3 of Othello. Okay, it refers to Act 1, Scene 3 of Othello, in which Iago takes leave of Rodrigo, saying, "Go to, farewell, put enough money in your purse," and then delivers a soliloquy beginning, "Thus do I ever make my fool my purse." Now, Coleridge's phrase is often taken to mean that Iago has no real motive, but he ends up doing evil only because he is inherently evil. So, Iago, there is no particular motive for him to behave in an evil manner. As in, there should be some cause for an individual to flip over to his evil side, right? So, that is missing in the character of Iago. In none of the situations do you find a triggering cause for Iago's evil side, for Iago to flip over to his evil side. But because he is inherently evil, he just cannot live without being evil. He is inherently and essentially evil. Therefore, even though there is no real motive for his evil doing, he ends up doing evil. So that is what Coleridge refers to by the phrase motiveless malignity. Okay, so moving on to the next question, which is the 9th question, the second last question of the series. Again, it's the name of a book and you're supposed to identify the author. What happens in Hamlet? It was published in the year 1935, and the question is, you are supposed to identify the writer of this book. The options are A, Caroline Spurgeon, option B, L.C. Knights, option C, John Dover Wilson, option D, T.S. Eliot. And the answer to this question is option C, John Dover Wilson. Now, Wilson tries to consider the ambiguous nature of the ghost and the impossibility of Hamlet's translating its instructions into a coherent plan of action. So, he's trying to somehow place how ambiguous it can be for a ghost to appear and give instructions, because right from the beginning of the play Hamlet, we get an inkling that Hamlet seems to be getting certain clues here and there, but majority of his actions, or I would say majority of his implications, would be based on his ponderings, based on what he thinks the ghost might be communicating to him. That is exactly why he is not able to quickly translate his thoughts into actions. There's always a delay because he has a series of thoughts to digest, and this delay creates a lot of confusion. Therefore, he is not able to, he himself is not able to give a finality or an actuality to the existence of this ghost. So the nature of the very existence of this ghost is ambiguous in nature, and that creates an impossibility for Hamlet to translate the so-called instructions which he assumes the ambiguous ghost is providing him with into a coherent series of action. Moving on to the next question, which is the last and final question of the series. Who wrote the work Shakespeare's Imagery and What It Tells Us, published in the year 1935? Options are A. G. Wilson Knights, option B. T.S. Eliot, option C. L.C. Knights, and option D. Carolyn Spurgeon. Now, which of these authors, which of these critics have written about Shakespeare's use of imagery? And the answer is Carolyn Spurgeon. Now, Carolyn Spurgeon is somebody who pioneered the study of imagery in Shakespeare's plays. She tries to throw light of Shakespeare's mind, thoughts, his themes, characters, everything by imagining his use of imagery in detail throughout his plays. So, Shakespeare's imagery, you find somebody talking about Shakespeare's imagery, it is inevitably Carolyn Spurgeon. So with that, we've discussed about 10 questions based on the specific topic, which is literary criticism of William Shakespeare. We are winding up today's session. We'll get back to you with another set of 10 questions focusing on a specific topic. So, thank you for today. Have a good day.